Can a budget e-bike be a good one at the same time? The Chinese brand Engwe promises exceptional range and comfort with their P26 model, but is there a catch? Let's inspect. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, nice to meet you. I'm Michael. Over here we inspect a lot of cool and interesting tech. Believe it or not, this e-bike costs less than $1,000 and promises some amazing features, plus pretty decent range above 100 kilometers. And as usual, our task here is to figure out whether all of these promises are true or not, to highlight the strong, the weak sides, have a lot of fun while riding, and figure out whether that's the right match for you. There is something quite important I need to share with you. P26 is equipped with slightly different motors depending on the region. It has a 500 watt hub motor for the US version and a 250 watt hub motor for the EU region, so that it well complies with most regulations. Although the difference in terms of watts is quite significant, the US edition adds only 5 Nm of torque on top of what the EU version counts on, therefore performance is going to be almost the same. I'm gonna be testing the European version, and right now, in terms of specs, it's very close to another Chinese e-bike model, the ADO D300C, and also seems to be a lot more affordable than the latest mid-drive equipped e-bikes from traditionally aggressive about pricing European makers like Decathlon. In order to check whether experience is at a high enough level, let's unbox. The pack is not too big and luckily not too heavy. If there's nobody else around you to help, I'd strongly suggest opening the bottom side first, then pulling up the cardboard instead of the close to 30 kilograms payload that is inside. It's one of these little tricks I've learned from the many awesome comments that you post under each and every video, so make sure to stop by and let me know what you think of this bike so far. The most boring part, namely getting rid of all these protective elements, but we have to credit Engwe for the really good packaging. There are no elements which are exposed or prone to damaging. So, a few tasks to complete around the assembling: mount the stand, do the same with the pedals. The handlebar is the most tricky and important part. I had to push the display up and down a few times in order to get some space and access the screws. You have to very carefully level all of that and then tighten everything really good, otherwise you may end up with loose handlebars, which is totally not a safe option. Next comes the front wheel. You're gonna have to align the disc between the calipers and then tighten it. Here I can point to the first obvious drawback. There is no quick release mechanism, unfortunately. You can buy such yourself for a few extra dollars though. Unlike the rear fender, the front one doesn't arrive pre-installed. You can do that additionally. Plus, without the extra clutter, Engwe P26 looks pretty cool, like a true hard rail mountain bike. I would say an eye-catching design of the frame. Battery is integrated, so the weight is well spread. It is made to be comfortable for people of any size. The website claims that you can adjust the seat post at a level good for a 2-meter tall person, but even at my size of 188 centimeters, it felt somewhat short, so I've replaced it with another one. If you look at the bike from a distance, it's nice and sleek. If you get closer and get to know the components, you're gonna start getting an idea why it is so affordable. In a nutshell, we count on a 250 watt motor with 40 Nm torque, a 17 Ah battery which would support you for up to 100 kilometers range. There are 5 riding modes, mechanical disc brakes, front and rear light, a 7-speed Shimano cassette on the rear, rack and fenders, a beautiful display, and all of that weighs around 24 kilograms. Now, shall we talk about the story behind these numbers, because I know highlighting all these specifications can be too overwhelming. As a starter, I'm really a big fan of the design because in many ways it doesn't look like an electric bike. You would think, okay, that's a regular bike. But when you check the details like this big tube here, the fact that on the rear we have a motor, and here these cables which are gently hidden inside the frame, then you figure out, okay, that looks like an electric bike. The weight, I think it's tolerable, and when you remove the rack, plus the metal fenders, plus the battery, the bike weighs around 20 kilograms. You can actually put it on a car rack for easier transportation. In terms of equipment, I think that's a good balance, especially considering the price point and the capacity of the battery. And since it's not my first Engwe e-bike to review, I would once again criticize the fact that they continue to utilize the cheapest grade of Shimano derailleurs. This here is the Tourney. If you ever decide to make any upgrades, probably should consider upgrading this component. The other concern I have is that this e-bike doesn't rely on hydraulic brakes, but I guess now we can go out for a ride, make some thorough inspection of each one of these components and figure out how they actually fit together. So, definitely fun to ride, good acceleration, at grade 5 it feels quite nice. The torque is enough to bring you to most places that you want to reach, but if your plan is to climb over steep hills, this won't quite easily work. You're gonna have to support the motor by pedaling, and we disclose just a 7-degree climbing ability, which is close to 12%, quite a modest value, but it is a fact that most e-bike makers kind of cheat with these numbers. The motor here is as responsive and powerful as most other e-bikes with similar wattage and torque, so I'm quite happy. Electronics is unfortunately a bit outdated. I've recently tested a new bike from Glare with 12-grade Canon sensor and it felt almost as good as a mid-drive motor with a torque sensor. With Engwe P26, it's rather similar to most bikes from the past 2 to 3 years, where it reacts a bit slower and you get the full motor power up until a certain speed value, as opposed to the confidence and smoothness that a torque sensor is gonna offer. As for the range, the achievements vary depending on your weight, the terrain specifics, the riding style, and so on. In my case, I managed to go beyond 60 kilometers on a single drive with a child seat attached and a toddler in it. Quite a good result, in my opinion. And the best part is that you can easily remove the battery and recharge it at any place that you want. Here's another potential weak point, the uncovered area around the crank bolt, where you may get some dirt incoming. Not sure if that's a standard setup or someone has forgotten the component to mount on my unit. Braking experience is consistent, you can fine-tune and probably think of switching to organic pads because the defaults don't feel that great. Ideally, get a decent hydraulic model, but be careful because not all kind of hydraulic brakes are compatible with the electronics on this e-bike. The tires are just standard, suitable for most terrains. Size is 26 inches by 1.95 inches. It's gonna feel better if you go for a thicker model, but this would be fine for some time. The front suspension is awesome, far better than expected. I couldn't find information about the exact model, but definitely it feels good. Going up a little bit, and here's the area you're most often going to look at, that's perhaps the display and the handlebars. I think in this particular case it's too narrow, and if you have the chance, go for something a little wider, it greatly improves the riding comfort. The bike stem is adjustable. I still cannot decide whether I like it or not, but given the construction, it's potentially another weak spot, especially if you decide to go downhill with the P26. For city riding, it's fantastic because it lets you adjust the height. I think most of the components are well grouped after all. While not each and every piece of the e-bike is of excellent quality, most of the parts are at least acceptable, and you can of course upgrade most of these components that you want. Still, if I may point out to the most significant drawbacks, I'd definitely refer to the lack of frame sizes, the non-hydraulic brakes, the 2 basic derailleur, the lack of QR mount for the front wheel, and the narrow handlebars. In the end, is the P26 by Engwe worth recommending? And I would say it really depends on what you're looking for, because if you want to squeeze the maximum at a budget below $1,000, this body here is hard to beat. It's very similar to the Ado D300C, with the difference that in here we have slightly more responsive electronics, but it lacks the convenience of hydraulic brakes. If you're looking for something high-end with much better components, possibly a mid-drive, then you should allocate much greater budget than the $1,000 that Engwe are asking for the P26. Therefore, I think in terms of value and as a good, decent all-terrain starting bike, that's a pretty solid choice. Do you have a favorite model which costs about the same money or a little bit more than that? And probably it's interesting to hear how much money are you ready to spend on a decent electric bike? So that's everything about today's episode. As usual, more information about the bike, a way to order it with a discount, and some ways to support the channel you're going to find in the video description area. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Michael and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!